Let's go!
One thing that I've been really wanting to talk about, one thing that's been a pretty hot topic and was also one of the hottest topics of the previous year, Multiversus. I think this is a fascinating turn of events for the game, much less what it kind of means, because we essentially had one of the biggest fighting game launches kind of all time for it to eventually get to this point. Multiversus 99% player drop is a lesson in how to not make a free-to-play game. And it's what's fascinating about the whole situation. It's funny, and I'll just say on a personal level, right? We checked out Multiversus along with almost everybody else because obviously it was free, so we can just check it out. A lot of people were immediately attesting the game's success because it was very successful. A lot of people were buying all the skins and the battle passes and things that were available at the start. It was very successful at the beginning, and the amount of people that was playing it was insane. Granted, we don't know the exact numbers outside of Steam, whether or not the console version is suffering as much between like the console ports. It's largely assumed that the console ports were the ones that was having these the highest player counts, and we still don't know what those numbers actually were. All we really do know is that the Steam version of the game is essentially done. Yes, and people are already mentioning several things that I think are worth mentioning that have essentially mired the situation to a point where it's not working out, where even though it's a free-to-play game, it might not be the game that people wanted. And that's the thing that's funny to me, because I feel like that might have been the case for myself personally. Multiverse always just felt like a really loose version of Smash Brothers. Still didn't feel like it was unique enough in identity and gameplay to really establish itself, to be different enough from Smash, but to essentially use its properties and licensing of characters to be a Smash-like that's worth checking out. To me, it was like I got about as much value in checking out Multiverses as we did with checking out Nick All-Star's Brawl game. Like, both of those games felt like they had pretty similar like gameplay loops and formulas about them being not Smash-like. But clearly Multiversus had more time in the oven. Clearly Multiversus was taking its online more seriously at the time. Clearly there was a lot of things working. There was a lot of things at the start that were setting up for a bright future for that game. Unfortunately, and I can say this for me on a personal level, there was never a character I wanted to play in Multiversus, which is kind of damaging because you have all these like properties in a game that's like based on all this stuff that you'd eventually get a character you want to play. The last time I tried it was like LeBron, because it was like, okay, they're adding a basketball dude, like a basketball character to Multiversus. I'm kind of fascinated by this. Let me check it out. All the roster that happened like since or around that, there was just never anybody that really kept my interest, right? I think I played like a little bit of like Rick or something, like very briefly, like extreme. I almost forgot that I did that, right? But I wasn't really motivated at that point. So to me, Multiversus just didn't end up being the game that I wanted to play a lot. It was like, yeah, that was kind of neat. I'm wondering if that was the case for a lot of people. But I know a lot of people really liked the game, and a lot of people really wanted to invest some time into it. To me, it just never ended up being a game that I wanted to play more than just like a few times, and it never grabbed me. Maybe just a me thing, right? It might have grabbed some other people much harder, right? And it might have been like the game for them at some point. But for me, it just never gave me the addictive qualities of like a Smash Brothers or the responsiveness of a Smash Brothers that make me really enjoy that thing. It was just to me, a not Smash. So a lot of people were like, oh, it's the success of the game isn't because of the free-to-play thing. The success of the game is because of its properties, is because it is a Smash, like all those things, right? That's where, when the game first came out, a lot of people were saying free-to-play isn't the reason the game is doing well. It is because of its properties, and it's because of, you know, it being a Smash-like game. So just to hold that into account. The other things that have happened, though, the game took an astronomical amount of time to exit beta. Like, just a ridiculous amount of time to get out of beta. At least for me, the online was okay, right? But I did hear complaints about the online from a lot of people in a lot of different areas because of the lack of server support in other regions. I still don't know if the game got an official update to Asian territories. I don't know if that eventually happened. I'm assuming it didn't, right? Like SEA doesn't have multiverse servers and stuff like that. It did not. Well, there you go. This is over the span of like months at this point, right? Because it already took a while to get like characters. I don't know if balance changes were ultimately the thing that really upset people about it. It's a combination of a lot of things. The fact that it is a free-to-play game means that you need to have a continual update cycle, right? There needs to be things that are added and changed to the game that work, right? That add things to the game and allow people to come back, and content rollouts, like all that kind of stuff. What's funny is that like Rumbleverse was kind of in a similar situation, right? Even though that game's getting shut down, we don't really know the exact reasoning behind it. But Rumbleverse got a lot of updates. You know, that's an example of a game that did get a lot of stuff as far as live service updates and everything. So they went through a whole bunch, and they were still going through it a whole bunch to like the very end, which is like right around now, you know? So it wasn't like they weren't able to keep up with the demands of a live service title, right? Where they are able to add things and continually update and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's the same requirement across. We've seen where other games were able to do that. It never seemed like Multiversus was able to catch up to that, though. And it never seemed like the rewards associated with it, at least to me, were really worth it, right? And that ends up being one of, I guess, the more challenging things about the platform of a free-to-play fighting game, is to incentivize the reason to continually play. Somebody told me, and once again, I need confirmation that this is true. Somebody told me that if you continue like these battle passes or some large astronomical amount of content that you play through and the level ups and all this stuff, and it takes forever, that the reward at the end of both of them was a Bugs Bunny skin for both of them. Like 2 separate Bugs Bunny skins. Not skins for other characters, but it was like, yeah, that's actually true. Okay, so I didn't, once again, I didn't see that, so I'm just asking. I heard about that. For a lot of people, it wasn't worth it because it was just one character and it was grindy as hell. And at the end of it, like, and then they did it again and it was for Bugs Bunny again. It's like, what the hell? So there's clearly a lot of things that didn't work out here. And it's also been, I think, what, dude, not 6 months, but at least like 4+ months now. It's been a while that I've heard any new characters that are being added to the game. I actually do not know if Marvin Martian eventually made it in, or maybe that was a meme. I don't know. Like, I actually don't know at this point. That's a relative longer period of time to keep adding stuff, and at this point we don't know. We haven't heard about their future plans. What's funny is that they invested a lot of their budget and time into getting all these characters, all this roster, all this online functionality figured out at the start, at the very beginning of Multiversus coming out. I was telling people and trying to explain the situation, because I still am in super defense force of free-to-play games. Free-to-play fighting games can work. They are the way to bring people in, because it did. Like, to be honest, it did. At the beginning, a lot of people were saying it isn't free-to-play that is what is making Multiverse popular. It is the fact that it's a Smash-like, and the fact that it is a big franchise game, right? Those were the things that people were attesting. I don't believe free-to-play was the issue with this game. If it wasn't for Multiversus being free-to-play, it in no way would have had the launch it did. And I even made this argument at the start, where I asked people the question, would you have paid $30 for Multiverse? Would you have paid $20 for Multiverse? Would this game have been worth you spending a premium amount for, or maybe like, you know, a standard amount just to play it? And to me, I don't know. To me, I don't know if there was ever any specific thing that was a big enough hook that would have grabbed its claws into me outside of the fact that it was WB characters. And I get it. Yeah, that was a big thing. To me, the situation that Multiverse is in right now, where we don't know what's going on, is quite literally sort of a similar problem to games like Halo Infinite, which also had a free-to-play element. But then some weird stuff happened on the back end. Like, a lot of developers left, a lot of weird shit happened, and they were unable to keep up with content plans. And there was still a degree of that in Multiverse, for sure, Multiverses, but not to the point where people were satisfied, like, ever. And it's not even the fact that, like, the lack of support is you're just asking way too much of these developers and stuff like that. That's actually a problem with the game, not the fact that it is a free-to-play thing. They did not plan out the fact that after launch, what do? After launch, you're charging for things, right? Your people are paying for stuff. People are probably willing to pay for more things. Will those things be there? And long story short, they're just not. And that seems like what Multiverse sort of ran into. Something very weird happened where it was just unable to keep up with the demands of players, and then there was a lot of decisions and weird things between it being in a beta and a not ranked state taking forever, not getting support overseas in many locations, not getting the quality of battle pass and content updates that people want. People want not just things to be thrown out, but actual, like, things that will function. And ultimately, yeah, this is a smaller studio at WB, so you would think that they would have had a plan for this, but it was almost like this is a wild assumption. It almost seems like they were blindsided by this game's success. That free-to-play did so much for Multiverse at the start, and the game was huge. There in no recorded history was there more people playing a fighting game online at like one time that we've actually seen numbers on. It never happened, man. There could have been some weird stuff in the back end, like executive stuff, where all of a sudden all of this support comes flying your way. And what will happen in situations where you get these big companies that suddenly are like, you would think they would just get more budget to make stuff, more developers to make stuff, just ready to go. They almost were blindsided by the success, and potentially that success is seen by executives and they try to like get in on it, you know? And that unfortunately happens a lot, and most likely is the situation that happened with Halo Infinite, where everyone's trying to get their hands into the goddamn pie in some way. And suddenly like a huge company like WB sees that, oh, this little project we're doing is now fucking massive. Like, it's absolutely huge. But other games have been able to match that in a way that is positive, and they can maybe not right at the start, but soon after start having some decent amount of support. Like Fall Guys is a great example of that. Even Rumbleverse, despite it going down for a weird unknown reason, was able to do that as well. It isn't the fact that, oh, this is an impossibility, we're blindsided by success, we don't know what the hell we're doing, to essentially have one of the biggest fighting game launches of all time, now to lose 99% of its player base, to be a game that, at least for me, maybe it was like the core game itself wasn't exactly what people wanted. Like, I don't know. Maybe it wasn't made to last very long. Like, there's a lot of things where some fighting games just don't grab people for a longer period of time. But if there's one lesson, right, from this whole situation, I think the lesson is actually that free-to-play worked. The free-to-play gimmick of a game works. It isn't an absolute guarantee of its success going forward, but it worked. Like, it, and from what I know, what I actually know personally, the effects of Multiverse's launch was so big that several developers from all over the world immediately turned their heads. Several developers at companies across the world that have fighting games in development, it turned some fucking heads. It's a very weird situation where something happened internally at WB where they were not prepared for the game's success and suddenly did not have the staff or did not have the foresight to continue development in a pace that would match its audience. But really, it needed more. It always needed more from the very beginning, and it never got that, unfortunately.